when I decided to walk through the doors of New Thought, it really ended up being the most freeing thing I could ever do for myself. So I thought that I would kind of trace the roots of how this comes about in man in general, and how it came about for me. So that's what the talk is, the freedom of New Thought thinking. So if we traced man's history back into the very distant past, we would come to a place where he did not consciously know himself. We would come to a place where instinctive man alone existed, for the self-conscious mind had not yet evolved. So this is extinctive man, okay? He didn't have a self-conscious yet. He wasn't aware of himself yet. There's our boy. So nothing can be more apparent than as man now appears today, which is the result of our growth and our unfoldment. But in order to unfold, we had to have something from which to unfold. And since man is intelligent, he must have unfolded from an intelligent cause. Instinctive man then means that the inner something of life, which is God in man, or the idea of God working through man. So that's what extinctive man is, the idea of God working through man. But if extinctive man is an idea of God, why is he not perfect? And why did man not, through time, feel like he was perfect? So the answer is that he or she, let's always remember, he is just a general term, is an individual, and he must be left alone to discover himself. That's how through time this all came about. So if man is created with the attributes of self-choice and free will, he must be left alone to make the great discovery for himself, which is what happened through time. From the day when an instinctive life brought man to the point of self-choice, he has waited patiently on man's unfoldment or enlightenment. So life was just waiting for man to recognize the consciousness from within. Mm-hmm. Life is carried on, so life in general has carried on this automatic function. Our body has silently told man what to do, and it left him alone in all other ways, and then was waiting patiently so that man could discover on his own the great discovery of his own perfection. For instance, which I love this analogy here, consider the discovery of any of the natural forces. We know that they must have always existed, but as far as man was concerned, they exist only to him after he has discovered and learned how to use them, right? For example, electricity. Electricity was really in the universe when Moses led the children of Israel from the land of Egypt. But neither Moses nor his followers knew anything about it, but it was there. So this is true of any of the natural laws. They always existed, and as soon as they are understood by us, then we use them. So this is the same way in our instinctive life with instinctive man. It is your birthright and your freedom which awaits your discovery of you and in your relationship to the great whole. If this is evidently true of all forces in the natural world, we must expect to find the same thing to be true of the inner voice within man. The first great discovery that man made was that he could think. This was the day that he rose up and said, I am. That was the huge distinction for man when he came from just being instinctual to recognizing through the subconscious the detachment between he realized he was, I am. This marked the day that man became an individual, and from that day he began his conscious union with nature and her forces. But he or she didn't have to work alone. A new freedom existed, for instinctive life had always been with him and would never leave him. So this was a consciousness that was growing inside of man. And then man recognized that instinctive life shall express more and more of its own limitless possibilities as we allowed it to, as he allowed it to. So we're evolving from an infinite basis, and that great discovery of man is that he could think, he could plan, and he could execute. As a result of this discovery, We have built up great civilizations around the globe. With all of man's power, man had through the ages, we still found that he was unhappy, he was sick, he was lonely, and he was afraid. The cities that were built hundreds and thousands of years ago have crumbled into dust, not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds of years ago. And history alone remains to tell the tale of most of man's endeavors. In spite of man's apparent power, he has suffered greatly. He has struggled along a weary road with a heavy heart, only to go to his grave. So why the suffering? Why the sorrow? Why this idea of sin? Why the sickness and a lifetime of trouble, only to be met by the grave through history? Why? Because his cry has appeared to go forth into an empty nothingness. But for the few enlightened beings, a still small voice said to them, "Man, know thyself." And this is the shift in man. The instinctive man spoke again and told him to search more deeply into his own nature. Look inside for your own happiness. Emancipate yourself. This is where it is, in here. This is the freedom that New Thought provides. There is nothing extraneous out there that you have to do to receive your happiness. It comes from within you. God bless you. Therefore man began to reason. An instinctive man within me is perfect, and yet I appear to be imperfect. This is his reasoning. My apparent imperfection must be the result of my imperfect thinking. And in reality, I have always been perfect. So I will begin now to think differently about myself and see what happens. And as he began to think differently about himself, he found that his body responded and his mind responded, and he no longer needed to suffer. He surmised that if God made him perfect, whole, and complete, he would begin to think from this basis. And as he trained his mind to do this, the organs of his body responded. He found that the thoughts of peace provided a place within him that created peace, and while thoughts of fear produced disturbed conditions around him. So when he stayed in a place of peace, he met peace. When he stayed in fear, fear surrounded him. The confidence made him stronger, while fear made him weak. In fact, he was able to trace each mental attitude to its physical correspondent. And he discovered that asleep or awake, his inner mind was working all the time. He also found that by analyzing his thoughts, he could discover what was bothering him and change his thoughts through his thinking. Then another idea came to him. The whole thing was in accordance to this law, just like the type of law of electricity. If it were a law, then he could always use it, and he could always respond to it, and it would always respond to him. From this, man gradually built up a definite technique for the practice of right thinking. That's what New Thought is. It's the practice of right thinking. He found that if he always thought of himself as being perfect, he would always feel better. But what would he do when his body appeared sick? Could he deny that he was sick when he was suffering? The answer is, in New Thought, yes, for sickness was the result of his thoughts. And by changing the thought, he could change the effect. He learned to turn away from his body when he was sick and go back to his mind and think of his body as being perfect, for his thoughts worked independently of his body. He turned from the image of sickness to the idea of health and said, I am perfect no matter what the appearance may be. But some kind of sickness had never entered his mind at all. That is, he never consciously thought of it. And for a while, this was a hard problem through time for man to solve. But by a more careful study of his inner voice, he discovered what he called his subconscious mind. And it took all of his thoughts and it did something with them. He found that there were certain combinations of thoughts which would produce certain kinds of illnesses. He didn't have to consciously think of a certain disease to have it, but if he thought certain kinds of thoughts, they would produce their logical results. For instance, if he became angry, it would secrete poison in his system, and so through the whole category of the human ailments, somewhere in his mind, there was a reason for that being. Perhaps he could not always tell where, but knowing his body was perfect, he could still heal himself. He was aware of that. Then, and we're talking through time here, this is all happening. Then a new discovery came to him, which was that he could think of others and heal them the same way he could heal himself. It seemed to make no difference where they were. He could think of them and heal them. This was an astounding fact, for it meant that there was a common mind somewhere through which his thought operated. And so he began to think good thoughts for others, and he found that mind responded to his thinking for them and caused some action to take place in their bodies. This is exactly what we do when we pray for you. This is what a spiritual mind treatment is. This is exactly it. And it is done unto us as you believe. So if you write on your prayer request and you believe in all your heart, then we correspond with our prayer, and this is how the shift occurs. So he called this medium universal mind, or the law of God. It seemed to be as omnipresent as the law of electricity or any other forces of nature. In this way, he discovered how it was possible that the whole human race might have held certain thoughts, and how they might have operated through anyone who was receptive to them. The whole idea is you have to be receptive to the thoughts. So this is what, when man, God bless you, called it race consciousness, race suggestion. But how was man to protect himself by those who used it improperly? By knowing that he could not operate, that it could not operate through him, that he was a perfect idea and could not be affected by suggestion. He learned to build a mental wall around himself, which could not be entered unless he chose it to. And this is called divine protection. Man had now discovered he could help and heal others by thinking into the universal law of mind. He realized that the time must come when the race would be freed and healed by knowing the truth about themselves. But because the law was mental, it could only work for those who believed in it. To me, this is so freeing. I just love this. So today, in the midst of eternal opportunity, which is forever presenting you with the evidence of its full expression, New Thought philosophy promises that if you comply with its teachings, you shall be able to bring into your life greater possibilities and happier conditions. New Thought or Ernest Holmes does not claim to have discovered any new truth. This is nothing new. This truth has been known in every age by a few, but by the great masses it has never been dreamt of that we could live in a mental and spiritual world. Today, however, people are much more curious about knowing the deeper meaning of their lives. So New Thought is the spoken word of those great truths known to the enlightened ones of all ages. It's been here a long time. To suppose that the creative intelligence of the world would create man in bondage and leave him bound would be to dishonor the creative process which we call God. On the other hand, to suppose that God would make man as an individual without leaving him to discover himself would be to suppose an impossibility. The seed of freedom must be led within the shell of human existence. We must make this great discovery for ourselves. We can't do this. No one else can teach you this but you. You know? I love this quote. This is by Gandhi. Gandhi said, "You can chain me, you can torture me, you can destroy me and my body, but you will never imprison my mind." And that's what we're talking about here. And this is the freedom of New Thought. Although the journey at times may be hard and the burden great to bear, we can still feel within us, if we choose to, if we train our minds to think about the divine presence and reality that is within you. There is this inherent nature of ourselves that is forever seeking to express itself in terms of love, freedom, peace. It serves all of us here. It serves us to listen to our inner voice, for it tells us the beautiful scope of life, of love, and it helps us to go beyond our wildest dreams, and it helps us to recognize the freedom and love that our soul is craving. Your soul wants this so badly for you, to just emancipate yourself and open up to this understanding, to this new thought philosophy. So this is the teaching of New Thought. This is the freedom of New Thought. It's all love, it's all law. As the love of God is perfect, so the law of God is perfect. The law is a law of liberty, not of license. It is exact and it is compelled by its very nature to return to the thinker exactly what he or she thinks into it. You know the saying, for whatsoever a man soweth, that he shall reap. The possibilities of the law are infinite and limitless. We may receive the benefits to the degree that we understand and properly use it. Somebody's shaking. You get that, right? Yeah. When you know, to the depths of your being, what you understand is what you will get. What you put out is what will come back. The highest recognition that we can have is the recognition of the omnipresence of Spirit. We should train our thoughts to recognize everything we say, everything we think, everything we do. It's all God. It's all good. It's all good, excuse me. A constant realization of the presence of Spirit will provide a sense of divine companionship that no other attitude can produce. Why should we not take this road? What a beautiful gift this is for us. I feel like we are chosen. This is a gift. God is. God is. God is not becoming. God is not growing. God is not incomplete. God is complete. And we should realize this fact and make use of it. For you are as God is. And as soon as you recognize that you can turn to the law and be ready and willing to be guided into your truth and your liberty, you will recognize that you're not a work in process. You are already here. This is it. This is the real show. This is not a dress rehearsal. It's showtime. The key here is doubt and fear. Doubt and fear is always what gets in the way of us fully surrendering to the new thought. When we understand that you are always protected, you are always guided, you are always loved, that you are in the presence of God's love, the universe's love, the cosmos, you are part of the cosmos. When you get that and all doubt and fear leave you and you replace it with confidence and faith, it's a whole new world, it's a whole new freedom, it's a whole new beginning. You know, I checked this out, and somebody can challenge me if you like on this, I'm not sure. But as far as I know, there are no records of Jesus ever asking God to do anything for him, and the same for Buddha. There was no request. He gave thanks and then commanded the law to work. That's what Jesus did. And that's what New Thought asks of you. In confidence, you command the law to work for you. It's waiting to do that. It wants to work for you. This is the correct approach to the Spirit and the law. So it's a wonderfully liberating opportunity as New Thought students of life, which is what I feel that I'll be for the rest of my life, a New Thought student, always learning, which I love. It's an opportunity for us to take time every day to see your life as you wish it to be, to make a mental picture of your ideas in confidence and wait for the perfect law to manifest through you. Once again, it's based on your abilities to trust. As the singer-songwriter Bob Marley said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery.
Yes.
Nothing but ourselves can free our minds. It's all about us. This is all about us. So in honor of Martin Luther King, I wrote this on, Martin Luther King did not do the I Have a Dream speech on 4th of July, but I don't know, it spoke to me. So I took some of the, without changing a lot of his words. I took some of the ideas in his I Had a Dream speech, which is one of the greatest speeches of all times. And I offer this to you from my perspective, so in honor of him for this 4th of July weekend. I have a dream too, for you, dear hearts, and for myself. It's a dream that is deeply rooted in ancient wisdom and new thought philosophy. I have a dream that you beings and myself will live out the truth of the meaning of your lives. I have a dream that one day all beings will rise up in freedom and rise up in love and sit together at the tablehood of brotherhood and sisterhood. I have a dream that one day in faith and hope we will be able to transform ourselves into this beautiful symphony of freedom and love, because this is what it's all about. This is what it's all about. I have a dream that man is free from the bondage of self and lets freedom ring from all man's destructive thoughts and actions. And let yourself ring deeply and profoundly from your hearts, from the bottom of your soul. And when this happens, as Martin Luther King says, when this happens, and when we allow ourselves to be free from our fear-based thoughts and dedicate ourselves to our truth, the truth of our being, the truth of our knowing, that we are joy and peace in the spirit of happiness and love, and that there is one life, and that is our life now, then we will be able to join hands and sing the words of the old spiritual song, free at last, free at last. Thank God I am free at last. And I really offer that all to you. So I